We're live. We're here, Phil. Expansion draft night. This was not our usual flyover. We're going to go live at 9, and we're actually going live at 9:10. This was 100% technical difficulties, as we are off of our game, having not done this in a month or so.
And Restream making changes that we should have practiced this, right? We should have seen the changes and given it a shot. This is a lesson learned.
Because we got here at, we got here like 8:50, 8:55, and we're playing around. And it was one of those, we know what we're doing.
We've done this a million times.
We're going to click the button, and then it's all going to work. And then we click the button at 9:01, and it didn't work. So,
Welp,
we're here, and we have about 19 minutes until the expansion draft live show, which I think is only live on sandiegofc.com.
Yes, and you have to request an invite to get there.
Yeah,
at least that's the way I did it.
Yeah, if you go to their website right now expecting to jump into the live stream right away, you're going to be disappointed. Make sure you go there now if you're watching this or before 9:30, and then just fill out your information. Access the link to the live stream here. Yeah, after you fill out, you're probably signing up for a mail list, let's be honest.
I didn't click those, so we'll see if I got away with it or not.
Oh, I'm the guy who assumed they were required and clicked it.
Pet peeve of mine, getting on lists.
You know how it works.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair, but it's not smart, right? This is bad MLS here, right? They should have put it on YouTube or Apple TV.
Or Apple TV. Like, why is this not on Apple TV? First of all, there's absolutely no reason this should not be on Apple TV.
Add it to the list of mysteries with the Apple TV deal.
Right. Wasn't it? It was, I mean, at worst, it was on YouTube proper for us.
Right.
I don't know.
Is what it is. Well, Matt, I think we should start because we have a lot of information to cover before it starts. Not that we have to hit everything, but I think we might as well get started.
Yeah, go ahead and kick us off with the pod.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I was just gonna put all this on the pod, but we'll do it properly. Here we go. Welcome everyone to a special edition of Flyover Footy. It is the 2024 MLS Expansion Draft Special, and I have Matt Baker with me here to break down all the information we have. And there are some rumors we might touch on before the event starts, but we will be live streaming the event. This is very exciting. We kind of threw it in last minute. We ran a little bit late with the live stream, but we're going, and we have lots of friends on our chat list here that I'm so excited to hang with tonight. And most of all, Matt, it's been so long. It is great that we're going to hang out and get nerdy tonight.
It's a live stream special. We're going to watch this real time. We're going to react to it real time. We know some details ahead of time already, but I'm kicking us off in proper fashion.
Oh my goodness.
It's like a wind down, but it's the off season. And so we're just diving right into it with, of course, a Noble Ice Sangria Swirl.
Perfect.
Which is appropriate because here in a few minutes before the actual expansion draft, we do have a giveaway for the live stream listeners, or live stream viewers rather. We'll do one later on for the podcast listeners, but we've got a nice Noble Ice gift bag for the live stream viewers. And get ready for a little chat interaction. It's going to be a trivia question in a little bit. And so we'll look for the first correct response when we get to that. But getting way ahead of ourselves, Phil, do we want to just jump right into the expansion draft and kind of set the stage for it all?
Yeah, let's go over the rules and give everyone just a baseline of what to expect tonight.
Yeah, so every MLS team besides San Diego's the 30th MLS team. This is their one intro to MLS expansion draft that will be 5 rounds where they can pick up to 5 players from any of the other 29 MLS teams. Each MLS team can protect up to 12 players on their roster. Everybody else who a team has the rights to is eligible and up for grabs to be selected by San Diego. So they'll have 5 rounds to select up to 5 players from this eligible pool of players. Only 1 player per club can be selected. So if St. Louis has somebody selected who, spoiler alert, we will, then we will not have anyone else eligible to be selected. There is a quote unquote selection clock. So if you're watching on our live stream and you watch the SanDiegoFC.com event, you'll see that there's a countdown timer for each round, 3 minutes for each selection. But if you've been following along in social media throughout the day on Wednesday, you're seeing some of these leaks, some of these announcements, some of these spoilers that I myself have put out there as well. There's no timeouts, so it's just going to go boom, 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 fast paced. That's kind of why we wanted to live stream this, because we know it's going to be pretty short and sweet. And no trades are permitted during the 2024 MLS expansion draft. This is very important to remember. So we'll give it away in a minute, but very important because they'll have each selection. So a team, San Diego will select a player, and then they'll select go through all the 5 rounds. And then after that, you're going to see the trade, something else announced. We did the same thing last year, where we traded for Tim Parker after the expansion draft. He was an expansion draft a player during that night, but he wasn't an actual expansion draft selection. So that will happen as well, but no trades during these 5 rounds for San Diego.
That's interesting. So we all have to pretend these deals haven't been worked out yet. Like the pick has to happen, and
Right.
then we have to go through the motions of, putting the trade in after the draft has happened.
Right. Just imagine it's like one of those NFL draft day videos where people are all in war rooms right now. Lutz and Hack and Olaf Melberg are all at the City Park training facilities, and they're in their war room right now, live with everybody else, making deals with San Diego and other teams. That's what I'm imagining, at least.
Yeah, little do we know they're at home doing their nighttime routine,
Right.
probably.
Yeah, they've got everything locked up. But it's also important to note, because of what I alluded to earlier, that clubs who have a player selected do get some compensation. It's just $50,000 in general allocation money, so it's not major. But they do get some kind of compensation for losing a player, and that's the nature of the game. I mean, I was talking to some people on social media today, and we were seeing, and we'll talk in just a moment about who is available for St. Louis City. But some of the players are key players, or players we really don't want to lose. Like, Celio Pompeu, for instance, is a
Mhm.
player who is not protected, and it would be rather devastating if we were to lose him. But if you think about it, if you're only protecting 12 players, what St. Louis did, and we'll go into it more in a minute, St. Louis basically selected their starting 11 and a couple depth attacking pieces to protect. That's our strategy. We selected our starting 11 to keep, and the other couple were attackers. With that in mind, you want to have valuable depth pieces. You want to have players who you can't protect because of the volume restrictions. That would be key losses to your team, because that's exactly what we've been talking about for
Yeah.
years now. Is you need to build that depth to where if you have a player step in for another one of your starters, you're not losing a level of quality. So you should be upset to see some of these players' names listed as available or unprotected for St. Louis. That means we've done a good job in building depth.
That's a good way to look at it. I think we're gonna dig really hard into that. And Matt, I say we do that now. And I know we might need to make sure we talk about San Diego's roster. That was
Sure.
next on the list, but I think we can jump to that when the time comes if we need to make sure we are all informed there. I'm sure you will get that out of the way. But let's go straight to the players that are protected
Mhm.
and not protected, and just kind of riff on this for a while, and we'll kind of see what people say in the chat as well.
Yeah, we'll go alphabetical order. St. Louis's 12 players protected who cannot be selected by San Diego are Rasmus Alm, Simon Betcher, Roman Berkey, Chris Durkin, Marcel Hartl, Jonas Horn, Klaus, Henry Kessler, Edu Leuven, Cedric Teukert, Thomas Totland, and Indiana Vasilev. So I mentioned we had our starting 11. One player who is not available for selection but doesn't need to be protected is Timo Baumgartl, recent signing center back for St. Louis City, who we will touch on at some point during this pod, but he's not currently on the roster. This is a 2024 expansion draft. So the scope of players available had to be under contract this past year. That's why some of the players you see available for other teams are Tim Parker for New England, who they did not pick up his option. He's going to be a free agent, but he can be picked attributed to New England. So they would receive compensation for him. That's important because Baumgartl, obviously, when he was first signed, people's question was, why would you announce this now and expose him to this risk? No risk there. So between Baumgartl and our 12, we have our starting 11. Every single position is accounted for, front to back, top to bottom, starting 11. And you can say you have 2 depth pieces in, well, let's just call them Simon Betcher and Indiana Vasilev, our 2 attackers who are outside of that top 11, counting Baumgartl as well. And so that's kind of, I think, the strategy Lutz went with is you protect your best and you give yourself a couple guaranteed depth pieces in Betcher and Vasilev, who are obviously key contributors. And then you just, by the numbers game, you have to leave everybody else available. Also automatically protected are our homegrown players, Caden Glover, Mekhi Joyner, Tyson Pierce, and Miguel Perez. 17 other players are available for selection. They include Jabulu Blom, Jake Girdwood-Reich, Kyle Hebert, Jose Kojima, John Klein, who, again, we declined his option, but we still have his rights, so he's attributed to us, Ben Lunt, Jake Nerwinski, Joachim Nilsson, Christian Oliveras, Tomas Olstrak, Selmer Pedro, Celio Pompeu, Jay Reed, Nukvi Thorson, Akil Watts, Michael Venzel, and Josh Yaro. All of those players are available to be selected by San Diego.
Yeah, so the big part here was it's been fun to watch all the players that people want to make sure they protect, and that's been all over the board. Almost like dart throws with what I would have expected fans on X and Blue Sky to declare the ones they don't want picked. We at Flyover posted between you, myself, Stuart, and Santiago.
Yep.
We all posted our guesses. Matt, you got 11 out of 12 right. I got 10 out of 12 right. So, let's talk about what you picked and what was different and why you think perhaps that was the case.
Yeah, the only one I whiffed on was Simon Betcher. And I thought we would leave one of our forwards exposed, knowing that we have Klaus, Betcher, Glover, and Joyner. Glover and Joyner obviously are already protected inherently. And so I figured we would expose possibly one of those in order to maybe spread the wealth. In particular, Jake Girdwood-Reich for me. I was worried about him being exposed to this draft because of the value of his contract. He has no exposure to MLS, essentially, some spot appearances at the end of last season. But that was the saving grace, I think, and will be the saving grace for Jake Girdwood-Reich, is that San Diego didn't know about him. They weren't fully bought in as Lutz was, because Lutz paid an $800,000 transfer fee to bring Girdwood-Reich in on a U22 deal, club control until 2028. He can play two positions, defensive midfielder and center back. So I figured that's a lot of value. That's a lot of excitement for this player who has a lot of promise, long-term club control, cost effective. He's not making that much comparatively. But fortunately, San Diego, I don't think, had him on their radar. And so this was a gamble that paid off, unlike one of the others that we left exposed. But that's what this was, a gamble. And there was the pros and cons. But as I heard today, you leave a player like Indiana Vasilev exposed, the club was expecting that if he was unprotected, he would be taken. Yeah. And I think Vasilev, maybe Betcher, maybe Klaus, those are kind of the players on the fringe, at least as far as the fans are concerned. Personally, I think Klaus was always a Lutz protection guy. I don't think he was ever a candidate for not being protected.
I don't either.
But Betcher was a little, I don't know. I know how well he did at the end of last season, but he's on loan. That doesn't always come to an agreement with teams when they pick him. We had to negotiate directly with Aston Villa for Indiana Vasilev. There's a lot of stuff there. So that was my one surprise, was not having JGR protected.
Yeah, and the JGR one, I'm glad you got to go through all the possibilities and reasons that was a risky play. But obviously, people don't have a lot of tape on him. I think we're the ones that are high on him. I'm not sure anyone else would. Matt, you kind of mentioned, us being 13th in the West, and a guy like JGR maybe not looking that great to everybody else. I think that'll be a little bit challenged when we talk about the rumor that's going around that is probably almost definitely true. But just to talk about my method, when I picked mine, I didn't have a lot of time to go deep on it. But one thing I regret was not checking whether Nilsson was coming here on a free. And I think you got to consider that, how much money has been invested in each player and how much of that goes down the drain with only $50,000 in GAM received. So when you think about someone like Klaus, we're getting a lot of people saying, why was Klaus, why wasn't he left unprotected? Bucket Hat SC said there was no way they would choose Klaus. In my opinion, they have pretty decent forwards already.
Yep.
And why take up a DP spot for Klaus, who hasn't really shown his true scoring form? So they're saying he's a DP. Why would they risk all of that to bring in a DP, that sort of thing on that kind of a salary when it's not kind of what they're saying there? But yeah, there is a lot of money invested. And with Nilsson, that wasn't the case. And I messed up on Betcher because his market value is pretty low and there isn't a lot of money invested in him. And so I left Betcher off and I put Hebert in because he actually has a pretty high market value. And when I started looking around at what kind of GAM center backs would get in the trade market for MLS, When we look at Reyes, who was just picked up from New York Red Bulls for what was it, 750,000? No, $800,000
800, yeah.
in GAM. It was corrected later by Tom Bogert. And so we look at, the stats were similar between those two. I think Hubert is a lower profile player than Reyes, but still, if $750,000 could be gotten for Reyes, I think Hubert could have gotten quite a lot of money, and we would have lost out on all of that if all we got was $50,000 in GAM for him being picked in the expansion draft. But that ignores a lot of other things, Matt. I can tell you're raring to go. But that leaves out, that's just a capitalistic view is what I kind of put out there. And that's very simplistic. It makes sense when you think of how practical and pragmatic Lutz has been about making sure we don't lose a penny on players like Dewar, that he's able to get money for no matter the situation that we were given with our left backs. So Matt, please tell me why money isn't the only story here. We touched on it with JGR, but that's not the only story.
I mean, yeah, and the big thing for me, it's not just money with San Diego, or it's not just what they're wanting to absorb, but it's the bigger ecosystem in MLS during this time period. The players who are available are not just being looked at by San Diego. They're being looked at by other teams throughout the league. And this is, if you want, Phil, we can go ahead and give away what we've been talking about on social media today. I think that's important, as we have about 3 minutes as we're live streaming this before the expansion draft. This is not a what if. I have it on good account. I've heard from sources that have told me that San Diego will select Jose Kojima in the expansion draft, and they won't keep Jose Kojima. The reason that we touched on the trade scenario not during the draft is because, as I was told, Jose Kojima is expected to be selected by San Diego and then immediately flipped to DC United. And it was reported by Stephen Goff on Blue Sky that that deal would be for about $400,000 in general allocation money. So we're looking at losing Jose Kojima in this expansion draft and then DC flipping him for GAM. So it's basically San Diego using one of their picks to acquire $400,000 in general allocation money. And I was also told,
did with Jake Cava, right? Is that a similar?
Jake LaCava, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this draft is also used to stock up on allocation money because San Diego does have some high dollar players. They've got Chucky Lozano, who's a designated player, and so they're signing some of these high value, high dollar players already. GAM is it's expansive in its use. We talked a lot about what it can be used for: buying down players, transfer fees, offsetting, just a ton of stuff, and overall buying down players to fit under the roster salary cap requirements. That's kind of what's going on here. And so it's not San Diego necessarily that's interested in a St. Louis City player. It's DC United, who, however that ended up turning out, DC calling San Diego and said, we will give you $400,000 in allocation money if you draft Jose Kojima and you send him to us. Now, the thing about this is, I think it's a little naive to say, why didn't DC just connect with St. Louis to make this deal directly? I don't know that St. Louis was eager to get rid of or sell Jose Kojima. I think this kind of shows that, if anything, St. Louis wasn't willing to trade or get rid of Jose Kojima. They valued him in some aspect, maybe not as a starter, as I'm hearing it. Olaf Melberg values him more as a second or third stringer, at least right now. But the idea that St. Louis doesn't really want to trade him, but they're willing to gamble. You can only protect 12, and Kojima, along with Salio and Ostrak and all those others, it's a gamble. You hope that this kind of deal isn't going to be worked out and you're going to lose a player. And so, unfortunately, it seems like that's happening, and St. Louis is just going to have to deal with the fact that they lose a very versatile, very smart, intelligent player who we had a lot of promise for, but did lose quite a bit of playing time when some of those new arrivals came in this year.
Yeah, and I think what the money was used for, and this is big because I think, we got a question from Daniel Gavura about, why do we protect Indy over Kijima? And I think the reason is because I think we thought people wouldn't see the value in Kijima, which is in the future, right? It's the potential is what is being paid for there. And there's more that goes into it, but, I think, it's interesting to see what Kijima would be worth now and what people are willing to pay now versus what he could become in the future. And I think they just had to hedge their bet. There's a lot of betting going on. It's come up a lot in what we've said today already. And
Mhm.
so, we were betting on protecting Indy over Kijima, and it didn't work out in Kijima's case. But, just to throw a little side thing in there, Troy Lesane came in to coach DC United last year, and they changed the tactics for them, and they became
Yeah.
a pressing team, and they weren't built like a pressing team the year before, but they got Jared Stroud, they got Bartlett to come in from pressing teams and from St. Louis, obviously, and other players trying to bring in, but they are desperate to bring in the type of players who can pull off that style. So this is a smart move from DC United. They need someone like Kijima, actually more than City does, if you can believe that. So that's another.
Yeah, I think he definitely fits into the style very well. I think he's valued and but will be valuable, and it's probably going to be a situation where similar to the other former St. Louis City players on their first year there, he finds himself somewhat of a role pretty quickly. That's a pretty hefty amount of GAM to drop for Jose Kojima. And one of the comments in our live stream chat about Jose Kojima's international spot, Jerry Hayes, I would say that Jose Kojima taking up an international spot almost had nothing to do with us and not putting him in our protected list. Jose Kojima is in the process of getting his green card, I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be completed by the beginning of the season, so he could still take up an international spot for DC United, but I don't think that played into us choosing not to protect him. I view it more as the value we placed on the players we did protect just outweighing, as opposed to looking at it like we're not valuing, not rating some of these players that we didn't protect. Because looking at some of these players, JGR, obviously, Kyle Hebert, Celio Pompeo, Tomas Ostrak, uh, obviously Jose Kojima, those are players that we value. We enjoy seeing them. They have massive contributions to City in various ways, but for one reason or another, we didn't think they would be attractive to San Diego or others. Some of them are fairly obvious, like Ostrak and Celio with their injury histories, Joachim Nilsson with his injury history. That was directly cited to me as a reason why
Hmm.
City hedged their bets that they wouldn't be taking. And so, as the expansion draft is now starting live, they're showing some hype videos, and I think going live to Andrew Wiebe and looks like Matt Doyle over in
Kalen
San Diego
Carr.
and Kalen Carr. Yeah, it's nice to see two of the three faces from last year. Wiebe and Kalen Carr or 2 years ago, were in St. Louis. But yeah, no, about the St. Louis players, it's just there were various reasons why we thought these players might not have been attractive, and maybe a guy like Indiana Vasilev, who does have youth national team experience recently, is a core member for the duration of St. Louis City, knows the system, is a great locker room presence.
Yeah.
All the factors that go into us rating Indy just happen to outweigh the risks that we placed on others that we figured other teams might not select them as a result.
Let's get some chat comments in here. Bucket Hat SC says, I think most MLS teams would take Indy due to his flexibility in positions, and he wouldn't use an international slot, which we just talked about.
Yeah.
I would cry over, Mel Hicks says, I would cry over Indy or Kijima, because Jerry Hayes said earlier, I'd cry over Indy as well. So do you think, so this is the next big thing. I was talking about this as well, because it felt like Kijima was being, groomed to be the next right back. Nerwinski's in
Yeah.
flux. I know it was a big comment from me. It's not. It's a little iffy. But do we need to re-sign Nerwinski? Does that change things, or is it about the same?
Well, and
This is Jeremy Clement.
yeah,
Clements ask this.
and here at some point we're going to show on our live stream the depth chart that I put out earlier, but on social media. But I think we have to consider some of our homegrown players as well in this equation. I don't know if they're ready yet to take some of these next steps, but I do think that Caden Glover, Mackay Joyner, being a part of our core striker unit, Tyson Pierce played right back extremely well. He was an MLS Next All-Star after playing right back. So not saying that he is inherently ready to jump on board and be Thomas Totland's kind of sub and relief. But we also have Akil Watts. There are options there. It's still a right back without Jake Nerwinski. I don't know if losing Kojima would mean that we're more likely to sign Nerwinski or more likely to sign another right back off the streets, but it might provide an opportunity for Tyson Pierce to see some minutes this season.
Yeah, and I'd like to see it. And if Kijima didn't play that much right back, but
Yeah,
Pierce
that's the other
played
thing.
nothing but right back.
Yeah.
I think he played center mid maybe twice that I can remember. So
Kojima was all over the board with his positioning this season for both
Yeah.
City and City 2. He played, I mean, I think the only position he didn't play was maybe center back and keeper. He played just about everything else, whether it was City or City 2, and so there's
Yeah,
value there in that versatility, but I likened it earlier today to jack of all trades, master of none, at least for what he's shown so far this year. And we have
agree.
a lot of now quality depth in just about every position, similar to Johnny Klein signing midseason, seeing a lot of minutes, and then losing just about all his play time. That's kind of where Kojima was. And so you're looking at now 2, 3 deep in just about every position before you really get to the conversation about Jose Kojima at this point in time.
Yeah, and when you look at the national media, they don't really know Kojima as much as we do, but them saying that he played kind of out of position. Yeah, I think the 8 or 6 is where he's best, and he didn't play there very much, so that's absolutely fair. May position in the future with DC or maybe not,
Mhm.
if he is good at so many, like you said, you laid all that out perfectly. But let's talk about the 8-6 position because that does take away our depth at that position. But Matt, you touched on that. I think we're still looking fine, depending on kind of how loans and health goes, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and show it
Yes, here we
on our
go.
stream. So the 6 and 8 right there, the
Matt,
center mid.
actually, sorry. I've had friends like asking me to give this to them, by the way, this week. They're like, when are you guys doing a show? Can you just give me Baker's spreadsheet?
Nice. Yeah, this took a little bit during my day job to put together because I hadn't updated it since last August.
Mm,
But I would argue that our midfield, center mid, center defensive mid, the 6-8 spots, it's not looking bad. Just going by who we have currently, we would have Edu Leuven and Chris Durkin as the two starters in those areas. We have Jake Girdwood Reich as the immediate other option for at least the 6, so
mhm.
relieving Durkin. And for Leuven, we already know that Thomas Ostrak is very capable to take over at that 8. I didn't put him in my depth chart because I put him up in the cam spot below Teukert. And I think Miguel Perez is a wild card at this point. We don't really know what we're going to get with Miguel Perez going into this training camp, going into this preseason. So I'm going to be very interested to see where they position him and how he performs because he has an opportunity to be fighting for that spot at center mid or wherever else. I mean, if he wants to push up into the attack or play a fullback spot, I'm not sure what the staff has in mind for him, but Miguel Perez is a wild card in this equation. You also have Akil Watts. I put him down in my right back spot, but I also put CDM next to him. Indiana Vasilev is also an option at that 8 position, especially. He played there a lot in our inaugural season right off the bat to get playing time. And when Jabula Bolin was going through some of his injuries, there's a lot of options we have, even though we don't have an out and out true, I would say 6 or 8 to back up Leuven necessarily. At least one who is experienced beyond Miguel Perez. You've got Ostrak, Vasilev, who are attackers by trade and who have played just extremely well at times in that role. So I feel comfortable if we needed to put them back there again, and then Akil Watts. So the depth that we have, you're looking at this that see 3 deep, 4 deep in the striker role for the 1 striker formation, 3 deep in a lot of other areas. And I think that versatility of guys like Indiana Vasilev, Tomas Ostrak, Akil Watts to play multiple positions really takes the pressure off of needing to have 3 deep in that midfield role.
Yeah, and Hartle is played as an 8 as well, a
Yes.
6-8, but we know what Hartle is. So, he can shift over there and we can move guys around. I don't see literally any problems with, filling those roles either, but I've saw some people
Yeah.
worrying about it, so I'm glad we addressed it today, but,
Yes.
another wrinkle is, that Melberg, the coach coming in, is, historically good with bringing up academy players. So,
Yes.
I would love to see him give Perez minutes if he can, give Pierce minutes if he can, and maybe I know we left ourselves high and dry with not signing new players at the beginning of last season, but with losing Kijima and I know there's still an opening to sign a couple more players. Maybe Lutz is talking about bringing in more players, but I'm okay with taking it easy and waiting till winter to give some of these academy kids a chance, or vice versa. Maybe someone's going to head out in the winter
Yeah.
because we can give these kids more chance. This is something that I care about. I'm happy that Melberg has a good history with that, and so as looking at this depth chart, the history could be, or sorry, the future could be extremely bright with these homegrown players in green.
Spot on. Absolutely true, and absolutely hopeful for those homegrowns to have an opportunity under Melberg. Another interesting thing that I have to address in showing this graphic is why Kyle Hebert is at the bottom of my center back depth chart. Um, only reason I put him down there is I am fully expecting one of Kyle Hiebert or Josh Yarrow to be traded or moved before the season starts. I don't see us, if you count this up, there's about 29 players on this active roster now that we expect Kojima to be taken in the expansion draft, which still has yet to start. Looks like they're the youngest sporting director in MLS history for San Diego is talking to Weeby and company. So while we wait for that to start, yeah, I put Kyle Hiebert only by the fact that I think he is at risk for leaving. In practical terms, he would be ahead of Wenzel in the depth chart if he starts the season with St. Louis City. One of Yarrow or Hiebert, fully expecting to go. But also, I think talking about our defenders and the formation kind of changes. You know, if we go three center backs, a lot of people are just saying, well, you can have Nielsen, Kessler, and Baumgart. Why not Giannis Horn at left center back? He's played there before this season in that role. I know Lutz rates him highly. He's spoken of him publicly about Giannis Horn when he was signed about that capability. That's another flexible option we have there. And you could put Jay Reed, Akil Watts, somebody out on the left side, even Tyson Pierce. So you have more center back flexibility if you shift into a three center back look than meets the eye necessarily, which I think lends more credence to the fact that between now and opening day, one of Hiebert or Yarrow is probably on their way out.
And that's the reason I was freaking out. First of all, I always rate Hiebert higher than anyone in whatever room I'm in.
He's good. I mean,
well, but and I was nice. I felt a little bit vindicated when I saw Tom Bogert saying that Hiebert might go, when I saw the price for Reyes, and I thought, my gosh, have we lost Hiebert without being able to sell him on for a decent value? That's actually, I was more worried about that. As much as I love Kyle, and I do think he's a good player, it would have been really sad to kind of miss out on him. You know, guys, I've been beating that drum for a long time. So yeah, that was one thing, but I'm with you. I think it's interesting too, because the rumors of losing a center back to San Diego started with Yarrow almost, it felt like a year ago. It's probably 6 months ago. And we signed him to a 1-year deal, and still we thought, boy, that could still come into play in the expansion draft, right?
Absolutely.
But it's not looking too worrisome for either one of those two now, would you say, Matt?
Yeah, I would definitely say, yeah, with the expansion draft, I don't think there's any risk there from those guys, especially if the Kojima thing comes to fruition. Like we'll be basically ineligible to have another player selected, so that's good.
Yeah, Matt, let's copy the stream here, and why don't you go ahead and list off the San Diego roster if I'm not cutting you off on other things here.
Why don't I just show the San Diego roster?
There we go.
This was
Pro.
I mean, I have to toot my own horn on this one. I'm watching the expansion draft on my phone, took a screenshot,
well done,
airdropped it to my MacBook, and then immediately jumped it into Restream so I could show this. So I have to toot my own horn. I've never done that before. Excited to see this. Yeah, no, San Diego has, I think at this point, 9 official players on their roster. And they've got, I mean, from various positioning, you've got Chucky Lozano, a winger, I believe, Marcus Ingverson, a striker. You've got Duran Ferre, a goalkeeper, Alex Mighton, a winger, Thomas Angel, a forward. You're also talking about Andres Reyes, who you mentioned earlier, the center back from New York Red Bulls that they just acquired for $800,000 in GAM. They're ticking some boxes, and then late this evening, it looks like they acquired goalkeeper CJ Dos Santos from Inter Miami for $100,000 in GAM, and the rights to defender Chris McVeigh from DC United for $50,000 in GAM. So they're putting the roster together pretty quickly. A lot of people are looking at this and saying, well, they have forwards. They have a couple attackers, especially with Chucky Lozano. They have some goalkeepers. They just got a center back. So based on these players, they're not going to go for these positions in who they select. And we expect one of their draft picks to be basically for GAM. But I think the biggest thing that we usually see in these expansion drafts are value, not high dollars.
Yes.
We mentioned Klaus being protected and wouldn't you want to expose because you don't think he's going to be selected. And that's I mean, it's not rating Klaus. It's putting a player who's a DP out there who you don't expect that another team is going to take a flyer on because they're so expensive. In New York Red Bulls case, they put a player out there who they're still making transfer fee installments for. I think it's Jovan Mihatovic. And they still have like millions of dollars to pay off in the transfer fee the way they structured that. So that would have to be taken over if a team were to take him. And I think, there are other players, especially on Sporting KC, who are available that you would just say, no, these are too expensive, or I don't want to risk paying for these high value players. Maybe they have injury histories. Then that's kind of with Tomas Ostrak for St. Louis, $800,000 salary, just coming off a devastating lower
Yeah.
body injury. I mean, that's why you see these more big names out there, but you don't expect many to be taken. Karol Swiderski's out there. Julian Gressel is an interesting option, I think, for San Diego.
Yeah.
I think he's a little higher value, but obviously what he brought to every single team he's played for, including Inter Miami, is a lot. Stuart Holmgren, I have to call him out for wanting some deal to occur for St. Louis to acquire Jack Mayer, who is available from Nashville. But
Love that.
I mean, there's just a ton of good names out here. And similar to what St. Louis did, I don't really expect all of those big names to be taken. This is a way to find value in filling out some of your roster and find some key players. Nico Gioacchini is available out there, so
Yeah.
we'll see if he can go 2 for 2 in getting picked in the expansion draft. A lot of interesting storylines that'll probably help finish shaping up San Diego's core after tonight for sure.
Just because I really like this player, Bucket Hat SC said that Alex Mighton is a really promising player. He is. He's an American national. I think he's also British, but he was playing, I think, for Nottingham Forest. And he was playing for them a lot in the championship, and then they got promoted. I haven't really seen him play that much, but it's cool to bring him in. I imagine he's a domestic being brought into this. And he's like a Indy Vasilev level player, Nico, that type of, he can score goals. He's quick, athletic, and can dribble. So that's one that's going to be fun for me to watch. And, I'm interested. That's really a funny shout right there as well.
Absolutely. And it looks like San Diego has made their first pick, I think, in the expansion draft. I'm not watching this with audio right now, but it looks like they might have made their first pick if I was reading lips. So we'll have that in just a moment. I think we're about to start getting pretty hot and heavy in who they're going to start taking at this point. I do think it's just going to be a lot of cash, a lot of value players that they acquire tonight. Anyway, it will be interesting to see if any kind of TAM players or DPs move, because they typically don't in these.
Yeah.
And there are some interesting players out there that have familiar city ties. So it looks like Hamidi Diop, yeah, the former number 1 super draft pick was taken, and he was taken from Charlotte FC. It looks like, if I have my, he was drafted by Charlotte, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think actually, if I recall correctly, Diop might have been the player who was taken by Charlotte when they traded St. Louis for the number 1 pick a couple years ago.
Oh, no kidding.
He might be that player.
Looks like he actually was loaned to a Serbian team. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. So yeah, he hasn't even been playing for Charlotte this season. So, maybe they weren't ready to give him starting minutes. Maybe San Diego is. Or, hear me out, he could be sold after this is over, right?
He could be. Yeah, so that's an interesting pick. He was, the number 1 super draft pick, and he was a defender. He was on loan, like you said, Kukaraki, and played only 3 games for Charlotte, played 11 for Crown Legacy. It's the value player. At this point, he was a former Generation Adidas player as well. A lot of promise, didn't have anything bust out. So you figure that he may be depth for San Diego in their back line. Interesting pick.
Looks like they also picked up Heine Gickling Bruseth, Norwegian midfielder, 20-year-old. I guess they signed him in August. Interesting.
81st overall in the 2022 MLS Super Draft by Real Salt Lake.
Oh, okay. Thank you. But I guess Orlando City picked him up last year. He is a U22 player.
Yep.
He signed with options through 2028. So that's a very much a value.
That's
pick,
like a
right?
JGR type pick that we were talking about.
It is.
They should take the U22 contract as well. That's part of this. Is you pick the player and he remains on whatever contract he's on. So that's the value that we were talking about, and why I was worried about Jacob Reich. So I mean, they're doing exactly what we kind of thought they would be doing at this point.
Yes, they are. Now I've lost the live stream. I gotta find the link again.
They're not good with graphics, I'll tell you that. Like, I think they might have announced 2 or 3, but I wish they would throw up a graphic of the player's name at least as soon as they're announced, because I'm sitting here reading lips as we're trying to understand while we do this and see who they're picking. So if you want to drop in the chat, if you see it and we haven't addressed it yet, we'll
Yeah, please do.
you. Let's take a moment really quick and let's do our trivia while we have a little break in the expansion draft. I want to do our giveaway. We're doing a giveaway on this live stream for just the live stream folks. So get your fingers ready at your keyboards if you're in our chats on YouTube, Instagram, X, anything like that. This is going to be a St. Louis and expansion draft related topic. So we're just going to go with the first person who is able to get us the correct answer, or one of the correct answers. It's kind of a fun one. So here we go. Name me 2 former St. Louis City players who were protected by other teams in this expansion draft, and they have to be from different teams. So I'll say that again as we get ready to turn back into the expansion draft coverage. Name me 2 St. Louis City players, former St. Louis City players who were protected by other teams in this expansion draft, and it has to be 1 per team. So you can't double up on that. And let me get on our live stream because it looks like the picks are in while we digest that question, and I see who all can get that one right. Let me get this pick for our live stream.
I am furiously typing names and things. Jasper, right. The one we haven't mentioned is Jasper Löffelsend from Germany.
Yeah, we've got it on the live. We've got it on the live stream now, and the screenshot I took was unfortunate for San Diego sporting director. He looks like he's a deer in the headlights on this one. But yeah, the first overall
he's a Colorado Rapids player, it looks like.
Yeah, so the first overall pick was actually Heine Gickling Bruseth, it looks like. That was the number 1 pick. Midfielder from Orlando City. Number 2 was Hamidi Diop, defender from Charlotte. Number 3, the third pick in the expansion draft, was Jasper Löffelsend, fullback midfielder from Colorado. Number 4 was, as we just said, Jose Kajima, taken from St. Louis City. They listed him as a midfielder, and then it also lists that he was traded to DC immediately. And then Thiago Andrade, forward from New York City FC, was taken 5th and traded to Toronto. So 3 picks going to San Diego as players, and 2 other picks looks like San Diego's acquiring GAM. Basically exactly how we thought earlier today this might turn out once we received word that sources saying Jose Kajima would be sent out. So if St. Louis City fans tuning into this, and I don't think there's probably anybody else, Jose Kajima is now a member of DC United.
Okay. Andrade is interesting. I'm looking at his current season, and it looks like he played in China. I don't know if he was on loan or maybe I have the wrong team.
I mean, he could be. That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, that's an Indiana Vasilov kind of situation where you are, if you're confident in your ability to get the player, which Lute said that night, they'd already been in discussions and they were confident that there wouldn't be any issues.
Yeah.
So it's probably a similar kind of situation here.
Boy, that's a weird one. But he's a 24-year-old left winger. So, yep.
All right. I'm checking timestamps here because we do have correct answers for the trivia.
Ooh.
Let me see here. I got to look over on Instagram too, because there was a correct answer on Instagram and there's a correct answer on, what platform was this? YouTube. So players who you could have named for this, the 2 players who were protected by by other teams who were former St. Louis City players who are on separate teams, that you could have said John Nelson, who was protected by the LA Galaxy. You could have said AZ Jackson, who was protected by the Columbus Crew. You could have said Jared Stroud, protected by DC United, or Lucas Bartlett, protected by DC United as well. It looks like a lot of folks had
John
AZ
Bell
in here. So this was the point of me specifying it the way I did is because there were a host of other City players who were left unprotected,
Mhm.
including John Bell, Tim Parker, Nico Gioacchini. And so this was specifically the people who were protected. Um, and it looks like the first correct response was over on YouTube, and it was Colton Cook, AZ and Stroud. It might have been, it was a pretty photo finish. There was like 20 seconds between. So
Mhm.
great. I mean, great job in both. You know what? Both of these were really, really close. I might just send a gift bag out to both of y'all. Colton Cook on YouTube and E Murphy 0220 on Instagram, who said Stroud and AZ as well. Uh, well done, fellas. Well done, people. Great answers. Also correct, just to give credit, Will Sutton said Bartlett and AZ. Phil Tamert said Johnny Nelson and Bartlett. JB Goodbody, our good friend, Stroud AZ. Good stuff, guys. Thank you. So E Murphy 0220 on Instagram. Send us a DM if you can on the Flyover account on Instagram. And Colton, get a hold of us on however you want. X, Instagram, and I'll get these out to you guys. Thank you for participating. That was fun.
So yeah, I mean, amongst the answers to the trivia, we have a lot of just massive sad and cry faces at
Yeah,
the news that Jose Kijima is officially going to be leaving St. Louis City,
and
and so I feel like we should talk about him a little
let's
bit here.
let's do it because it was I don't I wonder if a lot of people were like I don't really think Kojima's going to go when we announced it earlier on the show, but let's comment on Instagram for JR MYS RSS. Thoughts on why the pick and trade to DC just tuned in. This was DC's doing. We talked about the fact that it's possible, if not likely, that DC reached out to St. Louis and said, "Hey, what would it take to get Jose Kojima separate from the draft?" And St. Louis said, "We're not interested in parting with Jose Kojima. We are going to gamble that Jose Kojima is not going to be taken in this draft, and that San Diego will value other things." To that end, what likely happened at that point is DC rated Kojima high. They wanted Jose Kojima, and they worked out a deal with San Diego. And they said, "You draft him, we'll give you 400,000 in GAM." Now, the likelihood in this scenario is that DC overpaid, and because of the way that they did this, who knows what they may have offered St. Louis, but San Diego probably asked for a premium to use one of their picks
Yeah.
specifically for GAM. I'm sure they had tons of other offers. They used two of them to make this happen. I'm going to get this off of our live stream so you're not staring at this sporting director from San Diego the whole time. But I think San Diego essentially ransomed DC United. They made it worth their while to allow DC to play a part in this to get Jose Kojima. I would not be surprised if San Diego went into this saying, we want 2 or 3 players. We're going to get 2 or 3 players, and then we're going to get whatever we can GAM wise for the other picks. And so they probably had multiple suitors in multiple scenarios, and they just wanted the highest dollar value. They don't care about the player necessarily, whether it's Kojima or otherwise. They care about how much money in GAM they're getting. And so they probably went with the highest dollar suitor. And this was DC United's only chance really to get Jose Kojima. So they probably ponied up a little higher than they usually would have to get him.
Not to mention, there's an implication that if you're giving money to San Diego for some kind of a deal, maybe some of that money is there to make sure that they don't pick anyone else from your squad. So you're
Oh,
buying.
yeah.
So DC got Kijima, and maybe a little of that money is to be like, hey, don't pick anyone else from DC. A little handshake deal there.
Yeah, and those did happen as well. So a lot of these deals, the players who we were talking about who are contracted to San Diego, some of them were acquired. San Diego acquired an international pick from the Columbus Crew, for instance, for a real low price. This international slot was acquired for like $100,000 in GAM, and they usually go for like 200,000. So the popular theory is that exact point, Phil, that there was a handshake agreement. We'll give you a discount on this international slot if you don't take anybody from our roster. And it's almost assuredly that was part of this DC arrangement, where San Diego would have done this for any team that they did this type of trade with. Also had probably a similar deal with New York Red Bulls when they acquired the defender that they did either today or the other day. Reyes, I think when you make a deal like that, so close to the expansion draft and purposefully do it pre-expansion draft, you're doing it for that kind of a clause. So it's important to make that trade if you're the other team before the expansion draft, so you can say, now you're not, all of our other players are off limits. Like,
Mhm.
you're not touching us, and we'll make this trade for you.
Yeah, and I'm looking back at Kijima's, what he did for us, and total minutes for St. Louis last season was 2,057 minutes. Looks like he had 3 goals in all competitions, 6 assists. Now that's including MLS
Was
Next Pro.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was that 2000 MLS Next Pro? Because I think he only had like 700 or so in MLS.
Yeah, it's including everything. So he's gotten it, but I would say the I was looking up this one, and Aaron E commented that Champions Cup goal was massive. The CONCACAF Champions Cup goal was like,
Oh,
I would say it's the best memory we have of Kijima playing in a City
legendary.
shirt. Yeah, legendary. Came in at the end of a Houston game, was able to kind of toe poke a ball in for a goal, and it was a 2-1 win for St. Louis. Now they lost on the away leg, but that was so memorable for me, and I'll never forget that. Actually, it was such a cool moment for him to come in. Was that the first minutes he had for the first team as well?
In the Champions Cup?
I thought in general that was February
Oh, yeah.
20th.
Yeah, that was.
So that was his first minutes with the first team, and he scored a goal within a couple minutes of coming in. So
Yeah.
he only played 4 minutes in that game. So massive. That was cool. It was
That was
amazing.
that was epic, and this is a guy who, yeah, he took up an international slot, and so you wondered when we first drafted him that he had to have been rated highly, but he came prepared, as the story goes, to the super draft last year with, like, scouting reports of every single team. He's selling himself to all these coaches because he has a soccer mind. The
Mhm.
guy is just absolutely dialed into the science and the fundamentals of the game. If you follow him on X or Twitter, he has the most astute takes, and he's always doing it on really detailed footage and video of something, some point that's being made, and he has just the most spot on commentary on it. And so, in Carnell talked about this, Lutz talked about this, that he would, want to sit in on as much as coaching sessions. He has that kind of mind. I joked on X earlier today with our friend Matthew Rocchio that he said Kojima didn't even play his best position this year, and
Mhm.
my snarky answer was, what, head coach? Because his mind is that, I mean, that's where I could see his career going whenever he hangs up the boots. And that's one of the reasons why this is such a kind of a devastating type thing, because
Yeah.
he had the flashes of brilliance. We knew the capabilities were there. He had gotten chances here and there, especially to fill in, but he hadn't had the opportunity for a sustained push after getting into the league for a period of time. And
Yeah.
I wonder, and my concern is that it's going to be a situation like Lucas Bartlett, where Bartlett helps us out a lot and he fills in when we need him to in our first year, and then he goes to DC United and he's an every game starter. I mean, they protected him for a reason,
Mm.
because he was that critical to their team, and they rate him as a starting center back in MLS. I would not be surprised at all if this time next year we talk about Jose Kojima getting 2,000 plus minutes in MLS, cementing himself in the number 8 or wherever DC United values him the most. But that's the kind of player I think he could end up developing into.
Yeah, and it is. You kind of hinted at this feeling already, but we're always going to kind of be like, what could have been with him in a City shirt. And I think you're right, though, Matt. I think DC is going to need him more than we did, and it kind of was good timing for him to be playing for City, because we didn't have, the roster wasn't what we thought it was going to be, and there ended up being injuries, and we needed him. We had to give him 2,000 minutes. I know not a lot of those were with City too, but still, he was important and he was
Yeah.
needed to fill in those gaps, and he got a lot of playing time. So it's good for him too. I don't think this is going to be like an ugly leaving of any kind. So, this is just going to be like what could have been there. Another good chat here. Comment. Will Sutton reminded me that he signed for City the day that he joined us for the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah.
So he wasn't even on the senior roster until that day. So that's another cool memory.
Yeah, and I do think that this is a loss felt by the club for all the reasons we mentioned, but also, if you remember, we had given up our first round super draft pick last year, and so we didn't have a pick until midway through when we traded back into. So this was an investment that we had made in Kojima. You were
Mhm.
talking earlier in the show about a guy like Kyle Hebert that you think is a player you could get significant GAM value for if you were to move him. Kojima had a lot of sunk cost going into him. He had the money we traded to get into the first round to select him, and
Good
then
point.
the value of that international slot that went along with him. That's a $200,000,
That's true.
$175,000 price tag in and of itself. So you're attaching that when you're talking about a player's value on the roster cumulatively. That's a lot of investment into a player that I think St. Louis fully wanted to have that control over long term. And
Mhm.
so it's not like a death knell as far as, a Marcel Hartle type investment, but it is a significant loss, I think, just because the potentiality for him to develop into a contributing squad rotation member at the very least for years to come was there.
Yeah, I think if I had one question to ask Lutz tonight, it would be, looking at what he was able to get from Dewar and all the other players that we've had to send away, Marcanic, the players that didn't work out here that we weren't going to use, but we needed to get money for, right? He was able
Yeah.
to get Sam Adeniran, Philly did not keep him, but they paid for a half a season for him to St. Louis, AZ Jackson. So he's big on getting value and money, even if it's not someone that's worked out for our team. So I think the one thing I would ask Lutz after tonight is, did it hurt a little bit to have to because of MLS mechanisms, roster mechanisms? Was it painful to lose someone like Kijima, who we had invested money into, that we could have gotten some kind of money back had we chosen to get rid of him, that we clearly had a plan to keep him longer than that, to develop into someone maybe worth way more than $400,000 in GAM. So, it's a little bit of money lost, a little bit of pragmatism, a little pain to lose someone like that in this cool, Matt, that you reminded us that we did sink some money into him. I forgot.
Yeah, and his contract goes until 2027 as far as club option years. So he'll be with DC for the next few years as long as they continue to want to bring him back. And he was
Yeah.
on a supplemental roster, so he wasn't even hitting the salary cap as far as his actual salary. So there's a lot of upside to this pick for DC, and we're just going to have to wait and see how quickly he slots in to see significant minutes, because I really don't think he would have had a tough time to see significant minutes for City this year, barring injuries. So while we talk about the potential and what we're missing out on, if we're realistic about what his outlook was for 2025, we talked about the depth chart earlier. I don't think it was there, barring injury. So when you talk about the sunk cost and the lost
Fair.
opportunity in the future, I do think you have to be realistic about what his role was on the team going into at least training camp, where everything's on the table at training camp. You could jump guys' spots, he could jump over Girdwood Reich, he could jump over Watts, etc. But at least going into it, I think it was an uphill battle for him at best.
Yeah. Well, the happy thing here is that this is the list of players that we did not lose tonight: Jabulo Blom, Jake Girdwood Reich, Kyle Hebert, John Klein. Oh, well, kind of. Ben Lunt, Jake Nowinski, Joachim Nilsson, Christian Olivares, Thomas Ostrak, Selmir Pedro, Celia Pompeu, Jaden Reed, Nukvi Thorson, Akil Watts, Michael Wenzel, Josh Yarrow. So these are all City players. We have control over their destiny. Our destiny with them, rather, is a better way to think of it, perhaps. So, Matt, I don't know if we should wrap this up, probably, but I didn't know if you had any final thoughts. If you wanted to go over the depth chart one more time, that might take us another 20 minutes if we do it, but it's up to you. What would you like to close the show with here?
Yeah, let's close looking at the depth chart, and we'll talk quickly about some of the other players that are not a part of this depth chart. I'm going to show it for our live stream right here. Just the thing to know going into the back half of December and the rest of the activities for the offseason, including the reentry drafts, free agency, is currently, without Jose Kojima now, St. Louis has, by my count, 29 players on their active roster. This does not count Jabulu Blom or Selmer Pedro, but this is not our final roster going into January, going into the start of the season. I mentioned earlier I would expect Hebert or Yarrow to be moved, and so that would free up another spot that could be used elsewhere on the depth chart. So you're looking at one now, possibly two or more players who might be coming in to fill out various parts of the depth chart between now and opening day, training camp opening. One thing that I do see huge potential for that we touched on earlier that I really want to reiterate is a, a potential for a big step that our homegrowns and young players can take. Yeah, the homegrowns will get the focus because we're talking teenagers here. We're talking 19 years old. We're talking 17, those kinds of ages. It 17s across the board, basically. But we do have a lot of guys in their early 20s, looking at Jay Reed, looking at Michael Venzel. Those are some players, Christian Oliveris, even as our third string keeper. Indiana Vasilev's only like 23 years old right now. So
Yeah.
these are young players who have not yet hit their prime, and they themselves could take further steps. So imagine Indiana Vasilev continuing to take steps in growth, pushing for starting alongside Teukert, Hartl, and Klaus, pushing Betcher and Alm and Celio Pompeu for a starting spot. Only one of them is going to get it. And you're looking at that as your potential. So if you have, looking at our attacking group, I think this was the dream last year, right? You have, in a 4-2-3-1, you have a potential for Klaus, Hartl, Teukert, and Alm to be our starters. And off the bench, you would have in that scenario Betcher, Celio Pompeu, Tomas Ostrak, and Indiana Vasilev. Just one for one each person. I mean, that is a strong, much stronger attacking group than we had at any point in 2024. So the health is one thing, but right now with all the pieces in place, this is an exciting thing. And we haven't even talked about Glover and Joyner being a part of that.
Yeah.
The ability to rotate, to keep players healthy throughout the season is there on paper. We bring in another piece in, let's say, a fullback spot or a winger, midfielder, somewhere along those lines, and you're just shoring up everything so much more. And I think that's where you look to the recent signings, the recent rumors for St. Louis on what could augment this. We know Timo Baumgartel was brought in officially with the litany of experience that he has from Stuttgart in Bundesliga experience, PSV Eindhoven experience. I mean, Timo Baumgartel, we haven't talked about him on the pod just because it's the off season and we're in between shows, but dude averaged over 2,000 minutes per season for 4 years with Stuttgart. This is going to be a guy who pushes Joachim Nielsen and Henry Kessler. So our center back depth is shored up. I mentioned Giannis Horn can take a left center back role in a 3 center back look. Plenty of options back there. So with Baumgartel brought in, shoring up the quality in our center back look, then the question becomes what's next? And what's next appears to be Aaron Opoku. That was the rumor that was put out there by our friend Manuel Veth from Transfermarkt that St. Louis wasn't just interested, but St. Louis had reached a verbal agreement, this per Sky Germany, with Aaron Opoku, making an offer of about 350,000 euros, but they're only interested, player and club apparently are only interested in an immediate transfer. If a deal falls through, reportedly, it is unlikely to happen over the summer when it would be a free transfer when his contract's up. So what is Aaron Opoku and what value would he bring to St. Louis? Well, call him a striker, call him a left winger. He's an attacking player and he's speedy. You look at his numbers and the metrics and his EAFC card, and the speed just seems like it's off the charts. But from what I hear, it's true. You can get down the field quick with this guy. It's Celio Pompeu on speed type of thing. I mean, he is a player who can stretch the field quickly, and that's what St. Louis is interested in right now. So if you're looking at a winger, you're looking at a striker, another kind of change of pace option who he doesn't have a history of goal scoring, but if you can introduce that kind of a player to be that dynamic spark off the bench in the second half, that's a game changer in a lot of ways. And so with one spot open on the roster currently, Aaron Opoku is the player who St. Louis is supposedly wanting to bring in. We'll see if a deal can get over the finish line here in the next few weeks. But the transfer window obviously doesn't open until January, so there's plenty of time to negotiate. But my understanding is that his current team is playing hardball, not unlike Cedric Teukert with, was it Hanover? I think Hanover 96.
It is Hanover, yeah.
Yeah, so it's that same kind of situation where his contract is not up. It would require a transfer fee. The club that Opoku plays for is trying to what do you call it, gouging or whatever to jack up the price right now. And they don't seem too keen on lowering it to the point of just saying, okay, we want to offload Opoku, getting value for him somehow. And that's unfortunate for St. Louis because it would be a really nice boost to see this kind of a deal get over the finish line compared to what happened last year with Twyker, and to be able to shore up that extra speedy attacker going into the start of the season.
Yeah, I think you were and I were both kind of confused at first because we read striker and we're like, gosh, we got Betcher. What the heck are we doing here? This doesn't make sense. And then we saw the speed thing and it made total sense to me because, we're having a hard time keeping Alm healthy all the time. And when Alm's out, we start asking Basilev to just run in behind constantly. And that's not his forte. He does a good job filling that role. But that's not his forte. So we struggle when we don't have Alm in. He's not the same as Alm, but he serves a similar role to him. So it'll be
On the left
interesting.
side.
Yeah, well, yeah, true. On the left side, but it doesn't matter what side he's on. It'll have a similar effect, I think, no matter how he plays. So anyway, just another option it's something we needed a little bit more depth on. And so I would love to see him come in this year, right now. But clearly Lutz is going to make the right choice for the team financially, and it'll be what it is.
He is another German. He is of Ghanaian descent. And so he's currently playing in the 2 Bundesliga, I believe, with FC Kaiserslautern. And that's the club that seems kind of unwilling to lower the price or come to a agreement at this current point.
But he will be on a free if they don't sell him. You probably said that, but I wanted to reiterate it.
If we have to wait till the summer
like
and we're still interested and an agreement can be reached with the player, because you wonder if that kind of thing with Manu is puffing of chests one way, right? And I mentioned this only because I cannot say this enough. When things come out and people report things from sources or from media outlets, somebody has said something with a motive behind it. And so if it was reported that this deal will fall apart and it will not happen unless it happens now, unless Opoku is just, I don't know, weirdly saying, if you don't want me now, then you don't want me, then it's going to be an issue of the teams playing hardball with each other and negotiating, saying, you're going to get nothing if you don't give it to us now, or we're willing to say, if you're, Kaiserslautern saying that we're willing to let him go for free, but we're going to make you pay right now. And it's no skin off our back if it just happens to be a free.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the player right now. And I think that gives us a glimpse now that we have our center back shored up. Jake Nerwinski is still negotiating, last we heard. We've talked about our fullback depth earlier. The last player that we have the rumor is a left winger with speed.
Love it. Good choices there. And who knows, there might be more on the back burner as well. So Matt, you feel good about that? Can we wrap it up here?
Feel good about that. So wrapping it up with the expansion draft, because that's what we were here for. San Diego had 3 players and they came away with a boatload of GAM. To recap really quick for you, Heine Gickling Bruseth, midfielder from Orlando City, was the number 1 pick in the expansion draft. Hamadi Diop, the defender, former number 1 super draft pick from Charlotte, was the number 2 pick in this expansion draft. Jasper Loffelsund from Colorado Rapids, a fullback midfielder, was their 3rd player. And then the rest, San Diego received general allocation money for drafting Jose Kojima from us as their 4th pick, traded to DC United, and then drafting Thiago Andrade, forward from NYCFC, their 5th pick, traded to Toronto.
That's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this. It was fun to kind of stream it live and bring you guys the news as it happened, and just give you a St. Louis City centric point of view about the expansion draft. And it did end up involving us.
It did.
Which was scary, but we're past
scary.
it. We can move forward. We can all grieve together. I imagine that's what tomorrow's going to look like. So see you guys online, I suppose, on that one. Thanks for joining us. Flyover Footy. We are presented by Noble Ice Vineyards. We will talk to you guys again soon, probably as news comes, until we start the preseason ramp up.
Cheers to the rest of the offseason.
Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.